Oh, hello, hi. Yeah, so testing, you can hear? Okay. Sorry. So I will start this off. So we wish to acknowledge that Brockton conducts its business on the land of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe, Huron-Wendat and Mississaugas of the Credit most recently. And that we have an requirement to acknowledge the ways that colonialism and genocide impact the way that we work and the way that we do business, the way that we do art, the way that we do politics, the way that we do everything in this land. And it's really important that a land acknowledgement is not just words, but it's a call to action. So I really like to ask for people to consider what actions they can take to support Indigenous rights, Indigenous causes, and Indigenous people. So that could be, writing to your elected officials to ask them to end boil water advisories on reserves, or to support the land back movement, or to implement the recommendations of the TRC, to support Indigenous businesses with your finances, Indigenous activists with your finances, Indigenous artists with your finances, and to amplify the voices of Indigenous activists and journalists, which we have amazing ones in this country. And we have it in our mandate, and we do program Indigenous voices. We've got some amazing ones coming up, including next month, I think. So keep an eye out at the end. I'll be reading the names and then I'll know for sure. But keep an eye out. And we can't speak about colonialism and genocide without also acknowledging the horrors happening in the Middle East right now, and the genocide of Palestinian people by Israel. And we can also take action there. I know it sometimes seems overwhelming, but again, we have elected officials here that you can put pressure on for a number of things, to speak up, to speak out, but also an arms embargo is one of the most important things we could do because we are currently still selling arms to Israel. We shouldn't be doing that. We also want to say that this is an anti-oppression space. So we also believe that Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ rights, trans rights are under attack in the US and, here as well in places. So all of this is really written into our mandate, and it's values that we take very seriously. Yeah. Back to my script. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Thank you very much for Glad Day. Today's lineup will include a guest speaker, followed by a Q&A for the guest speaker, and then 4 readings, and then a group Q&A for the 4 readers. So if you are online, please type your questions into the chat as you have them, because there is a bit of a delay, and you will be sure to read your questions out when the question periods happen. And now I will pass it over to Nancy to introduce.
Hello, everyone. Brockton Writer Series was founded in November of 2009, which means we've been active in the Toronto literary scene for well over a decade now. Our nimble Brockton volunteers are Dorian Emerton, Faye Dog, Iris Robbins, Lavi Bay, and Zhenya Shestunova. And I'm Nancy Claythorne. If you're interested in joining this amazing team and getting some volunteer experience, check in with us after the readings, and we'd love to hear from you, and we'd love your help. We would also like to acknowledge with deep thanks the continued support of the Ontario Arts Council, who make this series possible, and also our sincere thanks to the Glad Day staff and to our audience. One more thing before we begin is that we are currently running a promotion with the Toronto Indie Author Conference, which takes place on April 26th to 27th, with Canadian specific education expert speakers and invaluable networking. The Brockton Writer Series is offering a special discount code in partnership with the conference. There's a link on our website that will give you that $20 discount to the whole weekend ticket. And now on to our guest speaker. Asifa Sheikh is a coach with Firefly Creative Writing and enjoys supporting writers in developing their voices, whether through coaching one-on-one, facilitating workshops, or working in collaboration with community partners. Asifa feels honored to work with others in growing their writing. Asifa is going to talk to us about playing with form in memoir.
Thank you so much. Everybody can hear me. Yeah, I have to use mic things, but this is good. This is clear. Okay, awesome. Nancy or Dorian, can somebody just give me a sign if I'm like maybe a couple of minutes close to time, so I don't timer. Yeah, thank you for having me here tonight. I'm really honored to be part of the series. And I'm also really honored to be sharing with you about something that's really dear to my heart. It's memoir writing. Actually, a lot of my experiences come from the class that I facilitate at Firefly Creative Writing, which is the life stories class. And so many of the things that I'm going to share with you today come from those experiences. And I think a lot of what I'll talk about is really being in the craft of creating a memoir and figuring out what shape it takes. So I do want to give credit to Chris Fraser because from Firefly Creative Writing, because she's the reason that I have all the experience that I'm sharing with you tonight. It's not even my favorite genre for reading, I have to say, unless it's fictionalized autobiographical fiction. But yet I've been having the privilege of working with writers, and so everything I share is really tidbits from those conversations I've had with writers. I'm really hoping that some of what I share with you tonight opens up this conversation around what we can hold as questions when we're looking at form, because sometimes it feels like a frightening part of memoir writing is like, what form or shape should it take? And there are many reasons why writers can feel that the form of a memoir, the shape or structures that it takes is intimidating or is an important part and can feel challenging to manage. What I like about this is that it also invites what are the juicier parts of the discussion, which is the structures and the elements that you invite into your writing, that you allow to have interplay. Different forms and different structures can be part of memoir. And I think that's so exciting for writers, is to open up to play. I feel like all of us have a memoir or two in us. If we're talking about writing about specific aspects of our life and what we want to share with others, we have plenty to draw on from. And I think form sometimes is important because it allows us to consider the container in which our stories can be shared. So I might be coming at this from two angles. Like, this one part of I share my stories with others, and the other part is I'm writing for me. I'm writing my stories and they're mainly for me. So I think intent in memoir writing is a big part of the conversation on form. So I guess I just want to talk a little bit about the question of when it comes up for a lot of writers. For some of us, and I think this conversation is a lot about people who plan their writing and people who just kind of launch right into their writing and let their writing take them places. And every writer has a different relationship to how they show up on the page. So for some of us, for a lot of memoir writers, the question of where to give form to your stories happens early on. When we're like, I want to write about my life, I need to know what form this is going to take. I'm someone who plans, I'm someone who needs to make notes and think about structure, and I want to know what that's going to look like. And for others, we're pantsers. We like to go with the flow. We like to keep writing on the page, let the stories take the shape that they need to. And we might go back, or we might be in that messy middle of things. And that's when we ask the question, oh, this is becoming very unwieldy. This is becoming larger. What do I do with this? And what shape should it take? So I think that's an important thing, is to recognize what kind of writer are you and what kind of engagement are you having with your stories, where you might be asking a question. So I'm going to put this conversation in two places today, and I hope this will help. This was just my categorization based on what I see of people who come to my memoir in the classes, the Firefly or the one-on-one coaching. I'm going to talk a little bit about two aspects, power and also play, about form. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about fiction as a separate, because I think there's some new and interesting things that are happening there. And I can talk a little bit about that. And then I'll end off with some really powerful examples without giving names or disclosing who, because these were folks who've written with us at Firefly, but just to give you some idea of the ways that memoirs that I've experienced and seen and what shape and form they've taken. So I hope that feels helpful for today. So the first part is just to kind of clear, we're talking about form. I'm talking about genre, or that's how it's understood, is like, are you writing this as a series or collection of essays? Is it a series of vignettes? Or are you writing this in fiction, so it's like a novel? Or are you writing, some other form, poetry? I've seen folks write memoir in poetry. But I want us to give it a wide berth. I feel the more permission we give ourselves to cajole as well as witness form happening in our stories, the more fun we're gonna have, which is something that I think is so important, is to stay engaged with play and joy when we're thinking of form in memoir. So it goes back to that dance between us and our stories. The way that we envision our writing taking shape on the page and how we want a story to show up. And think about why we want it to show up that way, but also when the stories come, how they want to be told. And that can sound a little more like Elizabeth Gilbert, and that really is an idea that I've taken from her, but I really feel that very powerfully in memoir, that becoming too rigid can create a lot of stress, and memoir writing can feel sometimes, depending on what you're writing about, can feel like work. There's the dreamy, beautiful parts of writing a memoir where you're encapsulating memories that feel really wonderful. And then there are the harder parts of memoir. And so there is a bit of a dance between our writing and ourselves. And I think it's the same with form, how that tug and pull of creating and giving shape and allowing things to emerge. So when I think about power and control in writing, I think about why people write memoir. And oftentimes in the classes that I facilitate at Firefly, there's a therapeutic element to, I just want to write my story. I want to write this part of my story. We also have folks who come and say, I have something to share. I have important knowledge and wisdom to impart, but I want memoir to be the form that I do it in. I want my stories to be an important part of some instruction or lesson that I'm sharing with others. So I think this is where form can be your ally, because really it allows you to cultivate and create something on the page that feels like you have had agency over it. Especially if you're writing about life-changing and life-altering things. I think sometimes writing into those things can be powerfully cathartic, therapeutic, but it can also be difficult and challenging. And form is the one place with writers, when I'm sitting with writers, and talking about what can we do, form becomes a place where it allows some control and containment. You get to choose how you share your story. You get to shape it. Maybe it needs to come out on the page first, but you get to go back and mold it into something that feels good to you on the page, that feels okay to share with others, if that's what you're wanting to do, is to share with others. So I think something about the form that you choose and writing into a form gives you a sense of agency over story. I also think when we're giving shape to our stories, and if we're coming from this perspective of agency, that it also is, like I said, that wonderful container. For some of us, we need a format to write into, so there's also control over how our stories flow. We might start with a format that allows us to produce the stories, and then we might have to remain open to think about, does this change once the stories have come out, once they're all on the page, everything I want to share, once it's here, does it change shape or does it stay the way that it's come? So I think there's something there about when you're writing into, I'll give an example. Many writers who come into Firefly are often like healthcare professionals, therapists or social workers. And sometimes when they're writing their narratives, they want a sense of control and predictability over their form, because they want it to align with some lesson or some message that they're sharing with their readers. They want their work to have an instructional element. And so having more control and showing more carefully constructed form matters. We'll talk a little bit about play and curiosity now. So because we're dealing with the weight of the meat of the matter really is the things that you're trying to share with people, the stories that you're actually writing. And so where can we be playful? And that is in form. form allows you to think about where can you invite curiosity? Where can it be something that you try that's new? So if you're someone who writes in stream of consciousness, is dialogue something that you might think of? When you're sharing, if you're writing in fiction, could you invite some poetry in? So I think play and curiosity and remaining open is such a big, important part of form. I say this because sometimes what I've seen can happen for writers is if we set ourselves a form to begin with, at some point we can get stuck. And feel like the form is no longer serving us. And then we feel so committed, so invested in the form that we're unable to shift gear and change into something new. So I think being playful and staying curious in our writing allows for us to have a chance to invite playfulness into our writing. Sorry, is it still clear my voice?
Yeah.
It just changed a little bit, so I
Yes. That's some volume.
it's a pace of what I'm sharing okay as well. I think one way to look at it is that our lives are so varied and the stories that we share are so full of variety. Can our form also honor some kind of interplay with variety of form and structure? Can there be lots of, can we challenge traditional forms? And I think for a lot of us, maybe there are many of you here who read memoir or have read memoirs that are very powerful and transformative or changing for, or life-changing for you, or have been intriguing or interesting. And there's definitely some element of inviting something in that maybe isn't traditional to a genre, a particular genre, but is something new. Again, I think form is kind of a relationship with life story. It's a dance, it's a relationship. You're thinking of, who's leading and who's following. And sometimes your stories lead and show you what form they want to take. And sometimes you're leading and you're continuing. And this can feel it can be very organic, and it can feel like the challenging part of writing a memoir, because we can't always set that structure so clearly in the start of a project for a memoir. It might be shifting and changing. And I feel like at Firefly, something I've learned is that community support, other writers talking about these things brings a sense of support when memoir can feel overwhelming because of challenges in form. I have a series of questions that I think of with writers when we're thinking about form and structure in writing and what are we trying to invite in. So I'm going to share some of these questions with you, and they might be helpful for you to think of if you are thinking of writing about your stories. So I have, why am I writing this? What is my primary intention and purpose? What elements of form show up in my writing naturally? So what are some things that you don't have to plan, or they just naturally come to you? If you're somebody who's a poet, you might find poetry flows from you when you're writing your memoir. Some examples, some ways of thinking of this question of the forms that show up naturally. Am I finding more poetry in verse, or am I writing like an omniscient narrator who's looking down on my life? Am I talking with someone intimately about my life? And that leads us to that. Who are you speaking to? Are you speaking to yourself? Is this a conversation you're having with your own self that someone is witnessing and that someone is the reader? Or is this a conversation with reader? And I say these questions because I think they're helpful in determining what form works best for you. What form amplifies what you're trying to do with your memoir? And then part of this is about process. So some of these questions are about your process as a writer. How much containment and form and structure do I need to write what I need to write? What do you need? What kind of planning do you need? Where can I leave open-endedness so that it feels like an open door inviting me in for playfulness? And again, where can I be more curious and examine and explore things with an openness? I'll talk a little bit about autobiographical fiction, which is autofiction, which is very interesting. And some folks will say, this is nothing new. We have been fictionalizing memoirs since the time that we've been writing stories. And writers might do it for a variety of reasons, may decide to take their story and fictionalize it. This might be to protect privacy and confidentiality, but it might also be because it's playful and it's fun. Fiction and imagination allow for memoir to transform in shape and to challenge in ways that may be impossible if you're just telling your story the way it happened. And I think the permission that autobiographical fiction is an opportunity to explore power in your writing and what it can do, transformation through form. An example I can think of, and I'm just starting to read it now, but it's fascinating, is a one called Valid by Chris Bergeron. I'm probably not saying the name correctly, but it's a translation, but it's an interesting examination of what autobiographical fiction can look like. I'm going to give a few examples of what I've seen when I'm working with other writers, in terms of fascinating and new ways. Again, all of my experiences really are with writers in the middle of their craft, like trying to figure out, what am I doing here? And I love being in that problem with them. Like, where are we? Where is this heading? What could it look like? These are very interesting questions for me. So I find that I've seen entirely poetic works of memoir, which are feats to me. I cannot imagine writing an entire memoir in poetry, but I've seen wonderful works of memoir in poetry. I've also seen the ruse of using dialogue with a fictional character as part of memoir, and that it can create an interesting way to share a story. This might also have to do with how close and intimate we are with the material we want to share, and maybe how much distance we want to create for the reader from the material. So it really is, again, dependent on intent for what we're writing, why we're writing our memoir, and what for. I've also seen interesting styles, that a lot of folks who are writing instructional works, but would like to use their life stories as fuel for what they're sharing with others. They would like to incorporate their own stories in their works, that they might actually use personal anecdote in a way that's very structured, that supports what they're sharing. Oftentimes, writers love to do this in all works of writing, but we'll also see writers choosing to incorporate works of other writers into their works, so other authors being incorporated. And there are lots of, if you're making your work public and you're publishing, people face a lot of challenges around that. But I think that's an interesting way, is to invite the voices of other writers when that's possible, to see how it amplifies your own writing. The last few things that I think I'll share are about staying fluid and open with our writing. Our stories have a kind of magic that they want to do, and we can't always know for sure what that's going to look like on the page. Where can we give ourselves permission to be okay with what shows up and work with it, and maybe not be so rigid or formulaic about form? I've seen incredible things happen when we open up that question. Well, could it be something other than you thought when you first started? What could that be? And so I think just being open and fluid is really important.
Thank you so much. Wait, it's Q&A now. Does anybody have a question? Questions about writing memoir from the memoir writing expert? I'm sure you all have amazing stories. Yeah.
Thank you for that. That was really interesting. I just wondered about your thoughts about what you feel like you owe. I ask this as a personal question. What you feel like you owe to the people who become sort of imbricated into your story? Like, what do you owe the parties who aren't you when you tell your memoir?
Oh, yeah.
That is also my question.
I've seen so many different takes on this. I've seen going full fictionalizing or fictionalizing aspects of your story so that you are avoiding confronting that. And I've seen memoir writers embrace the conflict and find respectful ways to talk about their story that still acknowledges the role of others. This is tricky space, though. I wouldn't say I know the full answers, but I have seen also heartbreaking stories where stories have been shared and it's not been so easy for those who've written them. So I think the intent of where we're sharing, why we're sharing, is an important part of that. Thank you for asking. There's a lot of memoir.
All presenter questions. I'm curious, I guess, coming from a memoirist perspective, how you sort of think about the delineations of genre as well as form, and the way those seem to be breaking down more and more. Like you mentioned ballad, and I know Chris Bergeron was refers to that as a piece of autofiction
Yeah.
and not as a necessarily as a memoir. And I think of a few others that I probably won't say out loud because I don't want to speak for the author. So I'm curious, like in your, classes and when you're working with students, where like, is there a time where people delineate that approach between like autofiction and memoir, or is that more something that, you throw out the window while writing to decide, and that's something to decide after? Like, does that get in the way, or does that like create like more discussion in the classroom?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. It's a really good question. I think in our classes, we're trying to open up voices and trying to allow for permission to be on the page as we need to be. So that question, I think, would be answered probably by saying, do what you need to on the page first and then look at that. And also, I think, like when I was thinking about this talk today, like I kept referring back to like how rigid forms can be and genres can be, and how that leading into things is actually gives people permission to try and create new things. And I have seen incredible things in writers' work come from this place of, what if I didn't give this a name? What if I didn't think of a specific genre? So maybe in the beginning parts, especially having some freedom to not.
Any other questions from online?
Thank you. Marian asks, do you have any advice for letting go of the need to come up with a lesson or conclusion in the memoir and just play and leave a narrative open-ended?
Oh, that's such a good question. Oh, yeah. I think that's what everyone really, truly needs. I think that goes back to the heart of the question, like, why are we writing? And when we think about our life story, there's this, I think we all have it. There's some part of humility that kicks in around, like, this is just me and my little life, it's just me and my little story. If it doesn't have some big conclusion or some lesson to impart, then it might not be important. And I always like to remind folks, everyone loves story. We all love story, and everyone's story is different, even when it's the same. So permission to share the stories that I have.
Hello, thank you. I'm thinking about this from an editor's perspective and perhaps getting a little bit more of your perspective as an educator. What can an editor do to support someone in writing a memoir with finding that balance between like the very professional nature that it can be and how personal they want to make it, or if they want to personalize parts of it? Yeah, I'm just curious about editorial care.
Like, I'd love to go on a coffee date with you and talk about that. Feels really big. And I think because I'm on the end of just supporting that spurt of like that initial, I want to write something, I want to do something. I'm so much in that beginning place. I think those kinds of nuances maybe are not in my purview, but I definitely appreciate the question.
Just wanna thank you for getting me thinking about this in a different way. I've been thinking back to my grandmother who wrote her memoir in kind of a very linear way. But then I also got to kind of play a role in kind of transcribing and recording some of the stories that she would tell, and then like putting them together with slideshow images and things like that. And I just really love like thinking about the relationship between kind of the chronological life story, but then the way that stories get told to people, like to children and relatives and friends, and often the same story is kind of being looped back to over and over again, and the ones where kind of centers of gravity in the story. Have you seen people, others kind of play with that, or do you have any thoughts on the relationship? Yeah, the way that stories get told from like in person versus the way that they get laid out.
Oh, it's really, thank you for sharing. That's really beautiful. I've seen writers bring in the writings of family members and ask, like, I have fragments of writing, what can I do with these? And so those are like, I think, beautiful problems to have in writing. Like, those are like the beautiful things to work with, is where can you honor the voice of a family member or someone who's left their writing that you want to honor in your memoir. But absolutely, I definitely have folks come with like interview, like folks will have like something that's an interview and be like, how do I incorporate what happened in this interview into my writing? We talk about dialogue and how to bring that, how to bring the voice of someone alive on the page. So absolutely, those are such a. I feel like I'm leaving everybody with more questions to think about. That's basically what I do.
Okay, last call for questions, but that was an incredible conversation. Thank you so much. Is it still me? It is still me. Okay, it is 7:03. So there is a little bit of time if you want to hit the washroom or order another drink. I know we haven't been doing that for a while, but sometimes I feel like I'm. Anybody think? We need another drink? All right, we're going on for it. Where am I? Right, now that we're reaching the world through our very own Brockton series writer, YouTube, we could really use your help to like and subscribe and make sure that we get that algorithm going so that we come across the feed of people who watch literary things on YouTube, because the algorithms, they give you what you watch, they give you more of them. And so we want people who watch literary things to get more of us. So please like and subscribe. This is also where I ask for your money. We have a picture here. It'll go around. If you still use cash, you can put cash in there. If you don't use cash, you can go to our website now or later. Now is good if you have a phone. And there's a donate. Oh, I don't know if you can see the donate.
Also,
Oh yeah, it's right in here. Oh, our wonderful, amazing tech. We've got this thing now. You can scan this and donate to us with PayPal. It's really important that you help us have money because we pay all of our writers and our guest speakers. We feel it's really, really important to pay people for the work that they do, because art is work and work should be valued. So please help us pay our writers and our guest speakers. Yeah. And again, when we move on to the readers, we are going to ask the YouTubers to type your questions into the chat because of the delay. We're going to have the readers up. Our first one is from way up north, and will be way up on this screen here. And then after, we're going to have them all up for a Q&A all together. So our first reader, Marian Agnew, is the author of the novel Making Up the Gods from Latitude 46, and a personal essay collection, Reverberations, A Daughter's Meditations on Alzheimer's from Signature Editions. She lives in Shania, Ontario, on Lake Superior in Anishinaabe Robinson Superior Treaty Territory. Marian, woo!
Hi, thank you. Thank you for making it possible for me to join from the hinterlands of the North. I'm going to be reading from my novel, which came out in October of 2023, and shout out to small publishers that do the work of getting our Ontario, our Canadian stories out there. Latitude 46 has been really great in that regard. So here's the cover, Making Up the Gods. I'm going to read to you from the point of view of Chen. He's 9 going on 10. He's staying with the main character, whose name is Simone. He calls her Aunt Simka. And 3 months before the action of the story starts, he lost his father and stepbrother in a traffic accident. So that's his stepbrother's name is Ryan. He calls him Rye. I think that's probably all you need to know. Sometimes I forget Aunt Simka is not really my aunt. I like her lots better than Aunt Sarah, and we aren't really even related. But now that I'm staying here, I want to put her on my target. I wonder where it even is now. Mom made me draw it one time. I was really mad at Rye. We've talked about it a lot. She got mad when I called it a target. She said, it's a circle of family. She said she read about it in a book. But it looks like a target, and I kept calling it that, and now she does too. We've talked about it more since the accident. The day she made me draw it was a Sunday afternoon, a while back before Rye started being nice to me. I was cleaning up the basement so she wouldn't yell after Rye went back to his mom's. It was never fair. He'd be a butt and do the opposite of what she said. Then he'd go home to his mom, and I'd get all the yelling for both of us. I said to Rye, you don't have to help, but I don't want to get yelled at after you get home, so I'm putting stuff away. He said, "You're such a suck. What a mama's boy." I minded my own business like Mom and Daddy told me to when Rye bugged me. I picked up some of the crashed paper airplanes lying on the floor, but Rye grabbed up 2 airplanes before I got them. I said, "Give me those." I tried to grab one and he held it. That made it tear even more. I had a little bit, but he had most of the paper. I put down the other airplanes to grab at the ones he had. He was laughing. He took all the airplanes and wouldn't give me them and kept ripping and ripping, making littler and littler pieces, little bitty ones. He said, "Look, mama's boy, I'm helping." Then he wound up like in baseball and threw a handful of paper bits at me. They went everywhere. Then he turned the TV up so loud I couldn't say anything. I was mad, so I went into my bedroom. On weekends, it doesn't feel like my room anymore because Rye is there. I can't say when he's visiting, or I get yelled at because he's not visiting. It's his home too, even though he lives with his mom most of the time. It was almost time for Daddy to take him to his mom's, so I stayed in my room. I put my face in my pillow and I even had some tears, but not a lot. I was still mad, but not crying when Mom came to my room and talked. Mom said, "Our family is hard sometimes, but we love each other, even maybe when we don't like each other very much. We're still a family." She said a bunch of other stuff too. Then she waited. She wanted me to say I wasn't mad at Rye anymore, but I was, so I didn't say anything. She said, "Chenoweth, I do not need this right now." Then she left. When Rye was finally gone, Mom started making supper. I came out of my room and put the games back on the shelf and picked up Rye's pop cans and the Twizzlers wrapper he left under the sofa cushion, and I brought them to the kitchen. It was a start. After supper, I went to finish. I picked up the crayons and put them in the tin where they live, and I put away the paper we didn't use for airplanes. Then I tried to pick up those little pieces of paper. It seemed like it would take every minute of every single day, all the rest of my life, to do it. I tried not to cry, but I couldn't help it. Mom came to see what I was doing. She said, "Chenoweth, come to the table." She sent Daddy to the basement with a vacuum cleaner. He didn't like it, but she gave him a look and he did it. Then she gave me paper and a pencil. She said, "Draw a circle." When I did, she said, "Who is in your family, Chen?" "You and Daddy and me." She said, "Draw a picture of us in your circle. It doesn't have to look good. This is a lesson." So I did sticks for arms and legs. I didn't have room enough for all of us in the middle. Mom said, "Chen, is that all the people in your family?" I didn't like it, but I knew I had to add Rye. Then Mom said, "What about grandmother and Gumpy?" I turned the paper over and made a bigger circle. I put me and Mom and Daddy and Rye in the middle, though I put Rye in there just because I knew that was the lesson. And I guess because it made Daddy happy too, and maybe Mom. Then Mom told me to draw another circle around the middle circle, like a target. I put grandmother and Gumpy there, and Gramps and Graham. I added Jamie and Maddie, my 2 cousins in Iowa. Aunt Kimberly is their mom, and she's Mom's sister. I like them a lot, but we hardly ever see them. Daddy came back upstairs with the vacuum and said, "What about your cousins on my side, Aunt Sarah's kids? They're family too." I didn't want to add them because I don't like them, and there wasn't room, and I didn't want to start over. Anyway, it was a lesson, and I already knew what he meant. Plus, it was a school night, and Mom wanted me to start the week with a good night's sleep, so I didn't draw them. I got ready for bed. When I was lying there, Mom came to kiss me. She said, "What did you learn?" We're all family, and people don't leave the target just because I'm mad at them. And I guess I can love family without liking them. But I didn't say what I really thought. Nothing was any different. The paper was still hard to clean up, even for Daddy with the vacuum. Rye was still a butt. I feel kind of bad now to say it, but he was sometimes. One other thing Mom said when I was drawing people, it is okay to have dead people in your family, like Gramps and Graham. You can still love them even though they aren't right here, which is good to know now. I hope that target is still in the basement somewhere. It would be 1,000 million times easier to draw if I left off the dead people, but now I don't want to leave off Daddy, or I guess Rye. He was my brother. Thank you.
Stephanie Seska.
who was born and raised in Toronto, where she lives with her husband and 3 children. A former newspaper editor in both Canada and Europe, she is graduate of Western University, Toronto Metropolitan University, and the University of Toronto School of Continuing Studies. Dotted Lines is her first novel. Welcome, Stephanie.
Only slightly taller than you. And everyone hear me okay? No.
Oh, probably because I have to turn it back on.
Oh.
Yeah. There you go.
Here I am. That's
Yes.
better. Okay, great. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a privilege to be here. So I'm just gonna hold up my book, Dotted Lines. This was published in October of 2024 by Granica Editions. And I'll just give you a very quick summary of what it's about. So this story is about a young girl named Melanie Forsyth. She's a young girl who's abandoned by her mother when she's quite young. And so Melanie is raised by her mom's former boyfriend, a man named Dave. And that is a very special relationship and kind of the heart of the story. And it's that special relationship that guides Melanie as she grows up and faces some pretty difficult things in life, like tragedy and betrayal as she grows up. So in this scene that I'm going to read, Melanie, it's about a third of the way through the book. Melanie is 11 years old. You'll see she's a pretty bright girl. She's on a lake with Dave, her stepdad, her mom's boyfriend, and her half sister Jess. They're on a paddle boat. And they get lost. And this is happening a couple years after their mom leaves the family. And so when they're lost, they get help for this other couple and find their way back to their cabin. We went back in the other direction, this time pedaling for about 10 minutes. But Dave seemed only more confused. I had no idea where we were or what direction we had taken. Everything looked the same to me, no matter where we went. Jesse began to cry loudly. Dave rested the bottom of his chin between his thumb and his finger as if he was in thinking mode. I could tell he was getting worried. Dave, are we lost? He looked straight ahead, squinting. Maybe, he said. He turned around, I guess to get his bearings, but he shook his head. Let's sit and wait for someone, he said, mostly to himself. Jessie continued to cry, waving her arms and kicking the back of my seat over and over again. I want to go home, she yelled. Dave ignored her as he sat there looking straight ahead, still thinking. I wish there were other boats around, he said. We'd passed only a couple of docks, and there didn't appear to be much activity on the lake. Jessie cried for what seemed like forever as Dave and I sat there waiting for something to happen. Maybe we should try calling out for help, he said. Dave stood up, the paddle boat swaying gently, and cupped his hands to his mouth. Hello, he yelled. We're lost and we need help. This, though, made Jess cry even louder. Dave sat back down. A nearby tree rustled. Shit, he said. Jessie cried for several more minutes until she started to run out of steam. Her face was red and sticky with tears and sweat, and I could tell she was tired. I want to go home, she said. Let's try pedaling in this direction, Melville, Dave said. We might recognize something. We started pedaling again, turning a corner I wasn't sure we'd seen before. This might be it. The lake was a bit wider at this point. I didn't recognize anything, but Dave insisted that we keep on pushing. We went on for another couple of minutes until he suddenly stopped. Do you hear that? I looked at him and waited, and then I heard it. Dogs barking. Keep going, he said. The barking got louder until we saw it, a dog. Dave went into high gear, pedaling his feet like a madman who hadn't seen land in days. Despite his efforts, the boat moved slowly as it approached the T-shaped float of old wooden planks. We climbed out and were greeted by 2 large golden retrievers who wagged their tails as they circled our feet and sniffed our privates. Look at these guys, Dave said, patting one of them on the head. So friendly, too. They must know we're dog people. The cottage on the property was wide and low, with a barely sloped roof and a wall full of windows. I tried to see if there was anyone inside, but the light hit the windows in such a way that I could only see reflections of the lake. I think someone's home, Dave said. Let's try not to scare them. He led the way in front of Jess, the two golden retrievers and I followed in a V shape, the five of us like a flock of geese. Dave switched to his tiptoes as he left the dock for land, slowly making his way up the arched patch of spotted grass that reached the back deck. As soon as we got there, Dave raised his right hand and motioned for us to stop. "What's wrong?" I asked. He didn't say anything as he continued to look ahead. I followed his gaze into one of the windows. From this angle, the light had shifted, so I could now see inside the main living room where a man and a woman were standing on opposite sides of the room. The woman was yelling, making motions with her hands and arms, though I couldn't make out what she was saying. The man would listen and start to shout back, so they'd be yelling over each other at the same time. Dave leaned over to pick up Jess and then slowly waved at the couple with his other hand. At first they didn't notice, but Dave swung his arm back and forth more rapidly. The couple both looked toward the window at the same time, startled to see three strangers observing what had been a private moment. Dave used his free hand to point over to the boat, which didn't do much to explain that we were lost. The couple came out of their cottage. The woman was tall and brunette, about the same age as Mom, and was wearing a pink floral dress and flip-flops. The man must have been at least 10 years older, though his hair didn't have any gray. I wondered if they were married. "Hi there," Dave said, a bit too enthusiastically. "Sorry to disturb you like this, but I've been in a boat with my girls for quite some time, and I'm afraid we're lost. I was wondering if you could help us out." "Oh my goodness, of course," the woman said, looking at Jess. Her voice was deeper than expected, and now that she was closer, I could see that her eyes were red and swollen from crying. She approached Jessie and Dave first, touching Jess's leg before asking, "What's your name?" Jessie tugged away, putting her head into Dave's shoulder. "I'm Thirsty," she said. The woman smiled. "Very nice to meet you, Thirsty. My name's Donna. Maybe you'd like a glass of water?" "That would be great," Dave said. The woman went back into the cottage as the man walked toward us. He introduced himself as Eddie and explained that he and his wife were both teachers and liked to spend most of their summers here. Dave told him how we'd gotten lost and credited the dogs for helping us find their cottage. "Max and Gus are the best there is," Eddie said, patting one of the dogs' heads. "This is the second time they've been able to help someone on the water." "What happened?" I asked him. "Oh, they're great dogs," Eddie continued. "Best there is." I waited for him to go on, but it was Dave who spoke next. "The girls love dogs. We have two ourselves." "Nice, nice," the man said. Dave tried to put Jessie down on her feet, but she wrapped her arms around his neck, refusing to budge. Eddie smiled at Jessie, but she turned further into Dave's shoulder to hide her face. "Sorry if you heard any of that," Eddie said, motioning toward the living room where he and Donna had been fighting. "Not at all," Dave said. "Things haven't been easy," Eddie said. Dave stood there and didn't say anything. "We lost our son last summer." Dave looked down toward the ground. "I'm sorry," he said. "I appreciate it. He was our only child." I wanted to tell the man that we'd lost our mother, but I knew Dave wouldn't like that, so I didn't say anything. "So, who do you look like?" Eddie said, poking Jessie's arm. "Do you look like your mommy or your daddy?" "Daddy," Jessie said, as she buried her head further into Dave. The man chuckled and looked at me. "And wow, you sure take after your dad, don't you?" I eyed Dave, wondering if he was going to correct him. Dave gave me a quick wink. "I have two beautiful girls, that's for sure." Donna came out with a map and some water, so that gave us something new to talk about. Eddie and Dave looked over it together and were able to figure out where our cabin was. Eddie insisted on taking us back in his motorboat. He and Dave tied the paddle boat behind us so that we could bring it back to the cabin. Eddie put on a hat and sunglasses and said, "Climb in." We all did so as Donna stood in the dock with the dogs and waved goodbye. Eddie pulled away in what felt like slow motion and kept the same pace the entire way back, puttering along the chain of lakes. Eventually, we recognized the tiny green cabin, and Eddie steered the boat toward the dock. "Thanks for your help," Dave said, shaking Eddie's hand. "My pleasure." "Bye," Jessie waved as we jumped off the boat. Once we were inside the cabin, Dave whipped up a quick lunch of jam sandwiches and applesauce, and then put Jessie down for a nap. "Let's hang out on the front porch," he said to me as he grabbed 2 cans of ginger ale. I followed Dave to the front steps where we both sat down. The dogs darted around the bushes, sniffing and searching for something unknown. "Well, that was fun," Dave said, making a face to show his sarcasm. A hissing sound escaped from each can as he opened them up and passed one to me. Yeah, I said, I feel kind of tired now. Me too, he said. We'll try to take it easy for the rest of the day. I took a sip of warm ginger ale and wondered what Eddie and Donna's cottage was like inside. I imagined an oversized television and several spare rooms with comfortable beds and chairs. Do you think we can go back to that couple's cottage? I asked. Oh, I don't think so, Melbell. They've already helped us out quite a bit. Their place is much better than the cabin, I said. Like it's probably even bigger than our house at home. Yeah, it looked really nice. Dave, I said, not sure if I should ask the next question. It was something that had been bugging me, something I'd been wondering since Eddie told us about his son. Those people, now that they don't have any children, does that mean they're not parents anymore? Dave stared out at the lake and took a sip of his ginger ale. Well, I don't know, Melanie, he said. Hadn't really thought about it. I guess I'm just wondering, if your child is gone, how can you still be a parent? Dave considered this for a moment. Well, once you're a parent, I think you're always a parent, no matter what. I'm not sure it's something that goes away. Know what I mean? I guess I said, taking another sip of ginger ale. And what about me? Dave turned to look at me. What about you? Can I be a daughter if I don't have any parents? At this, Dave put his arm around me, tucked my head into his chest and looked back toward the lake. You're my daughter, he said, rubbing the side of my shoulder, and you always will be. It was nice of him, but it wasn't what I wanted. What he needed to say, what I had to hear, was that Mom was coming home. Thank you very much.
I usually try to do a thing where I'm like, oh, here's some commonalities, some synthesis, because I try to program very different, very diverse kind of different things. And dead children is that? No, I don't. Little bit, I don't know. So next up, is this a robot? I don't want to ruin it if that is it is weird. Okay, sorry, I've already read his book and I'm like, oh no, what part is it? Edinburgh got as a PhD candidate in English and creative writing at the University of Calgary. Flew in today. He is the author of What We Can See in the Smoke, Crow's Nest Books, and the novel The Years Shall Run Like Rabbits from Buckwriter Books. His prose, poetry, and essays have previously been published in Clark's World Magazine, Strange Horizons, Filling Station Magazine, the Blasted Trees Publishing Company, Pinhole Poetry, and the Ancillary Review of Books. Find him at inkstainedrec.ca.
Derek Bollier, who's a lovely writer and editor who runs the Banff Center for the Arts out. Okay, who runs the Banff Center for the Arts out in Alberta, once told me in conversation that there is no living writer who can give like a reading without like a long preamble before that explaining the context of what they're going to read.
Which was 11.
Okay.
I will.
Imagine something like an angel kneeling on the moon planting seeds. It has traveled across the void to us. Call it a garden. Its flesh is the thick black of space that moves across its form in a river, never quite stable, always carrying the suggestion of water. It's a dark that can seldom be discerned by the eye, save for the inside and its wings, where lights that could be faraway suns are nestled. The gardener plucks those would-be suns as it digs trenches into soil and rock. It watches them blossom in the earthlight, watches the seeds of itself take shape in the soil as silver flowers and tree roots and saplings, as dark as the gardener itself. They are not the roots of the world we knew before. They are the roots that speak to their tender, that whisper and plan in shapes and scents and images of intention. Their creator watches with no eyes, A shifting whirlpool of deep blue vine curls in the rippling flesh, where eyes could have been, circles within circles in the black. The gardener opens its wings and spreads its limbs and becomes roots, contorting into the forest of its own creation. As it springs up in real time, its blue spiral watches from within the great trunk of a pomegranate tree that stretches over 30 meters tall, as if reaching for from the satellite to the human world shining in the sky. It continues to plant and tend within the roots, and oxygen spills out of the moon's first forest like daydream breaths. Imagine history as a line that now spreads new branches. In the old one, the moon is a dead, vacant pearl, and progress on Earth marches forwards unmoved. Nature remains unchallenged, and the dead die as they've always done. People close their eyes and dream nothing will change, and nothing does. Now. The gardener plants its seeds, and that branch of history falls away. Now, when we sleep, a new world looms above us. Now, when we sleep, the future is changed. Part 1. The seed of history. The cyborg wouldn't recognize the Garden of Eden. It is not made of mud, and it can't dream of returning to dust. Donna J. Haraway, A Cyborg Manifesto. Imagine a girl named Daisy. She grew up as a girl. She learned as a girl, and she loved as a girl, and she broke that way. That Daisy's not here. She's sucked deeper and deeper into that mesh of wonderful invention and innovation and enhancement, buried under a mountain of machinery, a suit of armor to hold her within. Now she's Daisy on the moon. Or Daisy in orbit around the moon. Decanted from a container of steel and smog and stasis gel, 70 years since the first dark and shining apple trees first bloomed, her body is a calculated community of organization. Imagine the way she moves. Naked and invisible in the darkness of her unlit cold halls. Her bare feet don't leave echoes as she glides forwards on limbs that don't tire, that don't falter. She arrives in the ship's empty morgue, wrapped in the icy silence, but you can almost hear the gyroscopes whirring in her chest. The dark of the room doesn't bother her. The lenses flick around the blue camouflage jelly of her perfect eyes, adjusting for the imperfect world around her and the creature she seeks to survey. It looks like a man, early 30s. Maybe that used to be true. The skin is freckled and lined with hairs, and he's thin and starved and gaunt. He is strapped to the table, arms and legs and eyes restrained, sedated by wires snaking from beneath to penetrate the mushroom ridges of his spine. "I'll come," he says, in a voice like wind and dead leaves. The cyborg says nothing. She lifts a hand, running it from the man's curly hair down over his nose and lips and Adam's apple. Her fingers pull data from the space between his nipples, from his belly, his sex, his legs. He doesn't tremble at her touch. On-screen visuals behind her sky blue eyes don't show any vital signs in the body before her. They show a million tiny lights burning beneath the skin. "Do you know who I am?" he asks. Daisy takes a knife from the operating table. "It doesn't matter," she says. "You're just the image of a living thing. You're a corpse pretending to breathe, but you're not alive." Her voice is a perfect symphony. It betrays purpose, but never feeling. Heat flows from her heart down through the circuitry of her fingertips, fire like the flames of the engine that propelled this ship through space to make the blade burn white hot, and she slits him from sternum to waistline. Imagine that perfect machinery of her arm as she cuts. The smooth precision of her motion, the passion and time and money that had gone into the creation of that arm. The thing that could be a man on the table gurgles and makes a noise like giggles, black liquid pooling out of his lips. On the tips of Daisy's fingers, staining the steel of the table with seed and sap. "You're not alive," he echoes as midnight orchids blossom from the hollow of his belly. "It's just a trick. The flowers tremble in the presence of the cyborg as she accumulates her data. Within their stems, his voice continues to hum. You shouldn't have come here. In 2014, the world salmon hops into an unfolding future to find life sprouting above on a satellite that had never been anything other than the moon. In 2015, landing parties from 16 nations formed the first in-person research site, touching down on the moon's new fertile lands. The total number of personnel is 13. They were made moonside for 3 months, and their findings are redacted. There are 6 deaths. The existence of the research party is denied by all governments. In 2016, many see a chance for a planetary bloodletting, an opportunity to thin the streets and highways and let the earth breathe a little easier. Some believe it's God, the gift of human expansion. Others claim alien interference with ulterior purposes beyond the terraforming that are yet to be discovered. Most don't think about anything at all. They just see land. In 2024, plans are being drawn. Reservations are abandoned, unanswerable questions cast aside. Aristocrats who wish to banish multiculturalism encroaching on their gated communities, environmentalists screaming for release, and the many indebted begging escape have won out. Human beings are going back to the moon to carve cities from apple cores. In 2038, the first city is launched from the frozen tundra of northern Canada as a single massive cage. It's gifted with the name Lunar London, full of memories and nostalgia for a landscape that had been swallowed by the rising tides of the ocean. The second city is named Troy for its walls, planted on the dark side of the moon. More cities follow after that, peppering the satellite with highways. And in 2039, the automation fleets clear, and the moon's first settlers stumble into the Earthlight like baby birds, blind and open-mouthed in the face of new terrain, so unlike pictures in history books. It's an October of deep purples and blues when the first baby conceived on the moon is born, and everywhere the forest blooms, growing through and over the concrete and wiring of those expanding and folding prepackaged human civilizations. Everywhere, the gardener's work embraces our structures, folding unnatural nature and natural artifice into something harmonized. And in 2041, the first funeral is held in Highgate Cemetery. The graveyard is twisted and imperfect replica of what might have been lost, with 53,000 gravestones wiped clean of markings, waiting for bodies. Well, I can stop there. That's a Okay, give me a second. All right, I'll follow you. Yeah, no, I mean, I can do this for 2 minutes. Okay, thank you.
Next up is Anthony Oliveira. And he is an international best-selling and 3-time National Magazine, 2-time GLAAD award-winning author, film programmer, pop culture critic, and PhD living in Toronto. His first novel, Dayspring, was released at Easter 2024 and has since garnered the 2024 Dane Ogilvy Prize for LGBTQ2S+ emerging writers, and was named one of CBC's best Canadian fiction of 2024. He hosts Dumpster Raccoon Cinema at the Review Cinema in Toronto and writes Avengers Academy for Marvel Comics, recently nominated for the 2025 GLAAD Award for Best Comic. Come on up here, Anthony.
Hello, how's it going? Let me turn this. There, is that good? Am I loud enough? Yeah? Thank you for that. It's always weird hearing someone read compliments you wrote about yourself. Okay, so this is my book, Dayspring. It is a retelling of the Gospels from the point of view of the beloved disciple, but it's also, as we've been kind of talking about today, a mix of memoir and other texts. So when I was thinking about which sections to read here at Glad Day, I thought we'd do these. Alex, could you let me know when I'm at like 8 minutes? Yeah, or you can. Okay, so this is a reading from the book of Acts. And on the road from the city, Philip met Kinnicus, a eunuch sworn in service to the mighty queen of Ethiopia, and who was keeper of the royal treasury, riding in a magnificent chariot, returning to their home many leagues away. And Kinnicus had paused in their journey and was under the shade of a tree reading aloud, which was the manner of the age, from the scroll of the prophet Isaiah about the suffering and the meekness of the Lamb. And Philip asked the magnificent figure, with a boldness that surprised himself, "Do you know who it is this is about, and what it is that it promises?" And Kinnicus was startled, and they said, "How can I, unless someone teaches me?" And they invited Philip to join them in the chariot, and the two talked as they rode. And they came to a river, and the eunuch who was a foreigner said, "Look, here is water, cold and clean. What can stop me from being baptized?" And Philip said to Kinnicus, who was neither gender and was both, who was servant of a distant queen, "Nothing can. The water is for all." And together they went down to the water, and the peasant Philip shed his cambric, and the courtier Kinnicus shed their gold. And Kinnicus was baptized. And when Philip was gone, transported to Azotus, Kinnicus continued home, bringing fire. For great was the learning of Kinnicus, and greater still was their ardor. And the church of Ethiopia grew mighty and grew wise. And its library was the envy of all the world, and its wisdom teaches the nations still. Saint Kinnicus, pray for us. A reading from the prophet Isaiah. Let no stranger say, "The Lord will exclude me from his people," and let no eunuch complain, "I am but a stricken branch." For rather, this is the word of the Lord. The eunuch who keeps my covenant, I will make for them a home. They will dwell in my own house. I will build for them a monument and memorial better than either of sons or daughters. I will give to them an everlasting name that will endure forever. And the stranger who keeps my covenant, I will bring to them to my holy mountain. I will give them joy in my house of prayer. I will make them glad, and all their prayers and sacrifices I will see blazing upon my altar. For my temple shall be a house of prayer for all nations and all peoples. Amen. Then, I used to work here for, I think, 2 years. This book is about the beloved disciple, but it is also about my own life. And this section is set right there by the ice machine. What's that? No, this ice machine right here. Sorry, actually. No, there's not the machine, the ice box thing that's right there. There's an ice machine in the back. It's good ice, actually. Important for cocktails. Okay. One night I let myself linger while we cleaned the bar, polishing the spigots of the soda syrups, wiping down the espresso machine, and he kissed me quick and fast, my ass against the chrome of the ice well, and instead of hot, I felt a rush of coldness, like a plunge into a cave grotto, as above us in the purple, the disco ball spun, and the sound system belched 80s soundtracks, pop songs about the Autobot matrix of leadership, and passers-by cheered and hooted at us through the glass. How about the time?
6 minutes.
Oh, okay. Let's do, this is a sonnet. It's about John the Baptist, but other people too. Sonnets are tricky. Still figuring out how they work. In the cellar smokes the prophet, mottled moonlit stump incensing to heaven, hairy carcass still handsome in its wreckage, pooling cold stone onyx in the crackle of the light. While on her damasked divan, the princess twisted, giddy at the gift of approaching platter dish, whisking silver dome with a pretty flourish, falling wrapped with tears upon his bloody, bloodless lips. I too have loved a madman who chose his holiness and not me. I too have ached for prophet flesh, like a carrion bird pinwheeling in the upper air. I too have wept, washing, fondling all my cradled ruin. I too have tasted blood, kissing all my worlds goodbye. That's Day Spring. I'm working on the next thing. Someone suggested it should be called Night Spring.
That's good.
Nice.
It's kind of the flip of this project, but the same project. Day Spring ended up being about the way that love can annihilate yourself and how wonderful and ecstatic that can be. I think the next book is about the way that is so horrible and the way that is sort of can make a monster of you. The way you can be totally subsumed. So I think it's a vampire book. And like this project, I'm interested in this sort of, as we were talking about memoir, actually, this like project of collage. This book is doing that too. So I've been thinking about vampire texts. I'm working on a Marvel thing right now, actually, that's about a vampire. So I had my nose in Baudelaire last night, the Fleur de Mal, 1857. And I found I hated all the translations of his poem, The Vampire. So I was up till 5:30 a.m. last night writing my own. Stealing from a bunch of the 1950s version. The problem with Baudelaire is I think you have to respect the rhyme scheme. Okay, so this is the Vampire by Baudelaire, 1857, but stealing from both Leclerc and Campbell were both 50s English translators. I also cut some stanzas. Okay. Sharper than a dagger thrust into my pleading heart, frenzied and arrayed in lust, and strong as devil's art. You catch my frantic soul at last, seize thy bed in thy domain. Thy harlot heart has bound me fast, as convict to his chain, as stubborn gambler to his dice, as drunkard to his bowl, as carrion to crawling lice, so damned it be my soul. And sword nor poison in my need would heed my craven cry, but said, unworthy to be freed, unfit even to die. Or even if from his dread hold death freed at last his slave, still you'd raise the carcass cold, your vampire from the grave. Oh, that's what I'm working on.
But you don't really get to go because now it's Q&A. So if we can get all of the authors kind of, if you want to bring, we're going to get chairs up here so you can all sit while we do the Q&A. While you bring your chairs up there, I'm just going to say Day Spring is for sale here if you want to buy some books. I think Ben has one each of both of his books. Stephanie, do you bring books to sell? There are books to sell. So after this, hobnob with the authors. Get your book sold, get it signed. It'll be good.
Deaf on the same year.
You're not saying here.
Oh, I don't know what do we do?
I don't know what to do with that.
What do you want?
You're right, that better?
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah, no, that's good. We'll just. Okay.
Yeah.
But you can angle, you get them all in?
Yeah.
All right. So you can take this, you can hand it back and forth, flip up to go, and down if you want silent. All right.
Questions. Who's got a question? I know it's always hard to be the first one, but I know there's gonna be questions about, we got a lot to go on here. We've got like grief for family, we've got vampires, we've got cyborgs.
Hello, thank you to all of y'all. These were all really wonderful readings. My question is for Anthony, on the collage nature of both the entire book and then what you presented today, what you read for today. And especially those readings from, was it Acts and then was it Isaiah?
Yeah.
What is what's your thought process then in the arrangement of a collage like that? Because they don't necessarily like fall, or they don't necessarily come one right after the other, like they don't have to. So what are the connections in your process of putting that together, and also still having it be a memoir in a certain way?
Yeah, one of the things thank you for that. One of the things I wanted Dayspring to be, even if everybody hated every part of it I wrote, is I wanted it to be an anthology of what a queer Christian mysticism looks like. Part of that was also to say, if you have a problem with what I've written, I need to know how you feel about this. Like, I need you to know how you feel about this moment in the book of Acts, where this sort of gender nonconforming foreigner is baptized, or the moment in Isaiah where he says very specifically that you must welcome the foreigner and the different. Similarly, like the moments when my book thinks about John of the Cross or Teresa of Avila, those are very horny moments. Like St. Francis de Sales, which my elementary school was named after, has a passage where Christ penetrates him, and it's like very sexualized. So the book is meant to serve as like a way to hold these things in one place as a kind of arc, but also I purposely wanted to make meaning between what things are opposite to. So the moment I read today is actually right next to each other. The moment where we hear about Kinnicus reading from the Gospel of Isaiah, and then we encounter the reading from Isaiah. Like I didn't write them in the order they're presented in the book. I actually had to spend a horrible few weeks with 300 Post-it notes around my apartment, organizing it. I tried to convince Penguin Random House to print the book as loose pieces of paper in a box. They didn't go for that for some reason. Yeah, thank you for the question. Brockton designing, and regularly people would bring or subscribe that it's just collections of pages and like and then they'd be like, here's signs. So just how people do it themselves and then bring it to you. One of the priests that taught me in high school told us that a Bible that's falling apart usually belongs to someone who isn't. I think about that a lot, the way we sort of use up texts. It's important to me.
I don't know what that says about the books that are falling apart in my home. Question.
I don't know if I've quite formulated this thought, but I think like several of the readings tonight were from authors taking on different kinds of voices, especially kids' voices in several cases. And I know that there's some of the, like there's youth voices in Dayspring, or like voices that come from different stages of a life. And I just wanted to ask if maybe several of the authors could comment on like what helped you to find authenticity in taking on that different kind of voice? Because like, you know, writing in a child's voice can be a difficult thing to be kind of true to that. So yeah, with some of the different kinds of voices that you were taking on, what helped you find the realness in that?
I can start with that. So that finding the voice and finding Melanie's voice for the story was something that I struggled quite a bit with, especially at the beginning of the writing process. At first I was going to do a look back, like she was going to be an adult, and I was going to tell the story from the adult perspective, but then something just, I don't know, it just wasn't clicking for me. It didn't feel real, it didn't feel authentic. And I feel like when I was reading the pages, it just I wasn't really entirely in love with the voice. So, you know, one of the things that I do as a writer when I'm, you know, in the process of writing, before and even after, is I just spend a lot of time with my characters, each of the people, like a lot of time actually away from the laptop and away from the screen, thinking really hard and carefully about the people that I'm writing about. And I listen to, you know, even music a lot when I'm thinking about the people. And I just feel like the voice came to me in that process. And so I kind of started to rewrite it and I felt more comfortable with Melanie. I knew who she was and it sort of just flowed onto the page more easily once I really spent the time with her and I really understood her kind of inside and out. Yeah, so it wasn't an easy process for me for sure, but I finally thought there was some time.
I cheated. The parts of my book that are the youngest voice are the parts, in some cases, I literally wrote when I was 16. Or they're the parts that are the least fictionalized because they're the parts that I keep obsessing about. So my brain is locked in these specific moments of 17, 18, and the text is just the representation of 20 plus years of worrying at that moment. The closer it gets to the present, the more it allows fiction to seep in, I think maybe is true. That might be wrong, but.
Yeah, I'm not really one for realism. I don't know if you guys felt, that didn't happen. Yeah, I think my 2025 is better. But for me, a big part of finding, so I'm not always, when I'm looking for voice, I'm not always looking for, I'm quite pithy and quippy in real life, and a lot of the time, I'm not on the page. So when I'm looking for voice, especially for a piece like that, like What's in Rabbits, I'm thinking about tone, and I'm thinking about, I think probably the most about like tension and synthesis. So I'm not necessarily thinking what would a real person say, so much as I'm thinking what strange thing can be said both in narration and in character that keeps the tension and the breathlessness of the scene. So for characters like Daisy and some of my stranger characters, I do a lot of it out loud when I'm. Is this on? I can't. Yeah, I do a lot of it out loud, like when I'm alone in my office, like I'm sitting there going, imagine, like until I sort of get that. That's also true for characters that have very different voices. There's like a happy little robot who grows up real fast in the following chapter of this book, and he has a stutter. And that was still me doing it out loud in my room. I would bite my tongue really hard, and then I would do like the voice for my little robot as he grew up. So it would go wah 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 wah. So that's usually what I'm thinking. So like I don't go near a lot of child characters unless I think it keeps the tension of that scene. So like it's not so much about realism as in like what would feel real in the real world, but as in like the realism of the scene that's being like created, and doesn't keep that like mode and sort of note like music.
Marianne?
Yeah, actually writing Chen was a lot of fun. He was in the first scene in the book that I envisioned was Simone, this 69-year-old widow standing in Lake Superior up to her ankles in early May when it's freezing, and she's wondering why she's doing it. But there's this 8-year-old boy. Chen became 9, going on 10 later. But and it's partly, I don't have kids of my own, so I have spent significant time with nieces and nephews. And right around 8, I noticed that there's a transition from being part of a home unit, that little cocoon of homeness, and they're becoming more, they care more about what other people think. And I think Chen is a little bit still of a mama's boy. I mean, Ryan called him that. So but for me it was relatively easy. My story takes place for over the course of maybe 10 days. And Chen is very much, it's a compressed version of Chen's life that we're learning about as he reacts to things that are happening in real time. And he's very much focused on his father and missing his father, and those feelings that you have between siblings of you love them, you like them, you don't even like them, you hate them, you know, and then Ryan's gone, and how he lived, and he's got some survivor's guilt around it, and he feels responsible. And so I mean, I think kids are a lot more complicated in ways that they may not be able to articulate, but just spending time. Yeah. Just I spent walking around, looking at things. What would Chen say of this? What would he think of that? And then again, the focus of it being around his dad and Ryan's death. It was really fun.
Just in regards to what Ben said about fighting his tongue, we at Brockton do not advocate self-harm in the pursuit of your art.
Also makes the art really good.
Justin, yeah.
Thank you. Anthony, I want to, I was thinking about the way that Dayspring, you could say, is queering the Bible, and Avengers Academy is queering the Marvel Universe.
Sure, is anyone from Marvel here?
You're hoping that they won't.
No, you too.
You're hoping they won't notice. Well, I was thinking, I was wondering if, yeah, as you were saying, in Dayspring, you're not inventing things, you're pointing out things you've seen. And in the same way that in Avengers Academy, you're picking and choosing characters to put together. Does it feel to you just like, well, this is the way I see these worlds, or does it feel like an activist impulse?
That's so. I mean, Marvel. Yeah. Oh, you do. Oh, yeah. Am I back? Yeah. That's so interesting. What was the end? Is it an activist impulse or?
Just the way that you're seeing the texts as you're coming across them.
It's very funny. Sometimes I do like TV interviews and they put like queer activists at the bottom, and I'm like, I haven't done anything. I'm just here saying what I think about these things. So I think that's what's interesting is sometimes just your perspective is itself a form of activism. My PhD work was about the 17th century, but it stops along the way in the early 20th century when a bunch of Germans are trying to figure out what the Baroque was. One of whom is Jewish intellectual Walter Benjamin. And for Benjamin, archivism is activism, that like keeping the record is the thing that is most important in the face of rising fascism and absolutism, that simply maintaining history is our job when these moments arise. So for this project, for Avengers Academy, it's very often like, here's Arnie Roth. He was created in 1990 by these comic book writers at the height of the AIDS crisis, saying Captain America's best friend is gay. And like, remember him is literally, sometimes just reminding is activism. And I find that depressing, but also kind of the work of my project is like, here's our history, whether it's comics or Jesus. Thanks.
Anyone? All right, then we will end off with our classic Brockton Writers Series question that we always ask, which is, can you please recommend us a book, one book, not five, one book that you have read somewhat recently?
I would read.
It could be a comic. Right, read, right?
Oh, I have my nose in Between Two Fires right now, which is it's set in the 13th century. It's very unclear if it is a fictionalized account of the plague or if this is like supposed to be how it went. But it has like a very like Dark Souls Bloodborne energy where like Satan has engineered the plague that is raging across mankind. Heaven has abandoned us. And it's about a knight and this little girl who talks to angels, just trying to get where the angels are telling her to go as they fight like weird monsters. There's a sequence where a statue of the Virgin Mary has come to life and is standing holding a real baby upside down, trying to get them to save the baby while it's trying to kill them with its stone crown. So good. Check it out. Prose is amazing. It's so fun.
Are we ready for a pandemic book? Is it too soon for the play?
That's kind of why I like
Okay,
thinking about sort of apocalyptic death and what it can.
yeah, I like it. It sounds good. Who was the author? Sorry?
I have no idea.
No idea.
It's called
Okay.
Between Two Fires.
Between Two Fires.
I've actually recommended this before, but I'll do it again. So this story is a book called Other Maps by Rebecca Morris. She is a Montreal writer, but the book takes place in Guelph, Ontario. And it's a Me Too movement story. It's a really powerful, wonderfully written story about two women who are friends, and they reconnect after a long time. And they basically try to, they go back in time because something terrible's happened to one of the women, and they go through that very painful process together and talking about it and try to right some wrongs. So very powerful story, really, really well done, and so it's small press book. So.
You said one. You can't show me. Really quickly, I'll say I just finished Omar El-Khadd's American War. I know I'm super late to the party. Devastating novel on a second American Civil War set around 2060. Truly like ripped out my guts. So
Is that too soon or too early?
yeah.
Yes.
I think it's from 2017.
No, I mean.
Oh, well, no, he said it way too late. That's the only part of it that I'm like, this is so unrealistic, like 60 years from now, are you sure? Really beautiful book. I just finished I just finished writing a review, which will be up in a day or two of Amal El-Motar's new novella, The River Has Roots. She's the co-author of There's How You Lose the Time Warp in 2019. But it's just this like short, sharp fable. It's really beautiful. Every line in it just cuts. It's great. And then as a third one, I also recommend Sarah Gailey's I think it's Come Home, which is just this incredible horror novel. Like I picked it up and I read the whole thing in one day. Just truly, like I just ate it. And then things in the book ate each other. But just...
Marion?
Yeah, I have just finished a book by an American author, Becoming Little Shell by Chris Latray. It is a memoir of a landless Indian, Native American, from the Little Shell tribe. He has Métis and Little Shell background, and so it's set mostly in Montana. But of course, borders, are fluid, and it was just the devastation on that side of the border with Indigenous people and not knowing how to reclaim who you are when your father was Indigenous and wouldn't have anything to do with his family. And it's part journalism, part more literary journalism than memoir or creative nonfiction or even personal essay. But it's really striking. And one of my favorite things is in the front, it's a hardcover. And so in the front of it, it has a map and it has the rivers and it has the mountains and it has dotted lines for the boundaries between different states and provinces, but there's no roads on it. And it's like, that's the land, the way the land thinks of itself. Maybe those dotted lines don't even need to be there. It was just a really neat experience to read.
Thank you, everyone. Everybody, big round of applause for everybody. Woo! Like I said, there's books to buy. Don't run away. Hobnob with the writers. I just have a few final last words, which is, plugging our next event, May 14th. Put it in your Google calendars, your Outlook calendars, whatever calendar you use. We will be back here at Glad Day on YouTube, and we'll be hearing readings from, and I apologize because they're not here, so I haven't done a pronunciation check yet. We'll be hearing readings from Kazia Jeronksik, Karen Smythe, J.M. Frey, and Adriana Chartrand. And as always, we'll bring in an industry professional to teach us about the business, art, or craft of writing. Thank you, Brockton readers, writers, Ontario Arts Council, and Glad Day. See.
Oh.